Accessible tourism.
Did you know that 1 in every 7 people has accessibility issues? I'm Telma. I'm with Together by Agic, the online magazine, and today we are with Ilídia Carvalho, certified tourist guide, lecturer at one of the Portuguese universities in Lisbon, and PhD in tourism and specialized in accessible tourism. 10 years ago, Ilídia interviewed around 30 people with mobility issues and people with whom she visited Lisbon. Offering her services as a tour guide, she was able to understand better the people's needs. Accessibility is a natural concern for our profession, and it should be part of our visitors' rights. How can we define what accessible tourism is, in fact?
Hi, Telma. Thank you so much for your invitation to come here and talk about accessible tourism, which is a matter that interests me for a long time. So your question is not so easy to answer because accessible tourism is a complex concept. And being a complex concept also has a complex definition. So in my opinion, then accessible tourism is mainly then a way of tourism that requires then the collaboration between all stakeholders in a way to present accessible programs and services based on the universal then design, or if you prefer, then the design for all, so that we will be able to eliminate or at least to minimize the barriers that can appear in different levels, human, physical, even information barriers. So that it will allow then the people with special needs and their companions or the caregivers to travel around in a safe and dignified way, always looking for the maximum independence. So this is my opinion and my definition of accessible tourism.
Thank you.
We tend to think that accessibility is connected with people with mobility issues. But in fact, it's much more than that, isn't it?
There are people who are blind or short-sighted, deaf or with mental disabilities.
Yeah, it's much more than this, but people going around in a wheelchair, it's easy to identify it. That's why people usually connect accessible tourism, or tend to connect accessible tourism to the wheelchair mobility issues. But we also have then blind people, we also have then deaf people, we have people with mental disabilities, and all these belong to the accessible tourism. And we cannot forget pregnant women, people that go around with little children, and of course we usually came to a certain age that we have some problems with the big steps and also the long walks. So we have to prepare everything to receive all these people with all kinds of limitations. So that's accessible tourism.
How can a tour guide make a tour memorable for all guests?
Well, Telma, the art of tourist guiding is the art of adapting itineraries, adapting programs, adapting then the way we explain. And when dealing with accessible tourism, we also have to adapt. We have to adapt then by looking for the best ways then to orientate people to get to a certain place. We have to adapt also in explaining then for those who don't see in a very then detailed way. So this is another adaptation, and that's the most important thing for a tourist guide to be able then to give a proper service, is to make the right adaptation towards the visitor. And this is something, and now I can also tell you something else. It's something that we should not learn only from the experience. It's something that you should also have from an education, because there are so many things that we can then use to help these people then to travel around. So education is also fundamental, and education for a tourist guide, it's very important, also in what accessible tourism is concerned.
Ilídia, I know that we are finally starting to have different institutions preparing tour guides for a more accessible tourism. What's your input about this preparation for tour guides?
Well, as I told you before, education is important, and fortunately, FEC, so the European Federation of Tourist Guides, has already created the T-Guide course, which is more focused in this learning disabilities. Here in Portugal, I can tell you that Agic, the Association of Portuguese Tourist Guides, is also considering on creating a course that focused in all disabilities, so that the members of this association and will be able to learn how to deal with these situations.
That's very interesting. Thank you very much. Normally, the program is created by a travel agency, and not all programs are adjusted as accessible ones. Are these specific itineraries organized according to guests' needs?
Well, it's not so easy for the agencies to create these accessible programs. The agencies are responsible for the programs, and that's why they must be sensitive towards these matters. And there are even some agencies that have already specialized in this kind of tourism. But not all people with special needs go to these agencies. So in general, the agencies, they must be able to produce nice programs for them. The problem is that sometimes when they make the programs, they don't know who is coming. And that's why it's necessary to adapt at the last moment. For this adaptation to happen, then the entire environment should be then accessible. And that doesn't happen. We know that we have still some problems in some monuments and some hotels. So we have to be aware of the limitations of the visitor, and for that the communication is the most important thing. So we have to talk with them, we have to check which are the limitations so that we can properly adapt the program.
What is the major concern of a visitor with accessibility issues when visiting or traveling to a foreign country?
Well, from all the interviews and all the inquiries I made, I can tell you that these visitors with special needs, they just want the same as all others. So they want to visit the place without taking any risks. They want to know about history, about culture, about all the details. They want to get to everywhere where all the other people are able to go. So they don't want to be discriminated, and that's very important. And some of them would like to have a special tour, but some others don't, because they want to be with their families. They want to get on a bus together with their families who have no special needs. So they just want the same thing as all people want, to enjoy traveling, to able then to be safe and, well, learn about the world.
Well, Ilídia, thank you so much for collaborating with Together by Agic online magazine and answering to all these questions, which are so important nowadays.
It was really a pleasure to be here with Agic, Together by Agic, and also thank you so much for choosing then this nice scenario. So Belém, where we are standing, and it's also one of the areas that must be visited in town, and also has then the accessibility in many of the monuments. So come and visit Belém with us.
Portugal has been awarded the Accessible Tourist Destination 2019 award from the United Nations World Tourism Organization, UNWTO, becoming the first country to be granted the title. The award presented for the first time this year by UNWTO in partnership with ONCE Foundation, recognizes Portugal's efforts to promote tourism accessibility. In Europe, there's a market of 90 million tourists with specific mobility needs. Hence, the award is an important milestone for Portugal and highlights its leadership in accessibility for all. Making Portugal an accessible country for all has been a priority work undertaken by the Portuguese government. In 2016, the All for All program was launched, aiming to empower the tourism sector, helping to create accessible itineraries throughout the country, promoting accessibility offerings, and encouraging the country to be an inclusive destination for all. As part of the program, various initiatives were developed, including accessible roadmaps made available at Visit Portugal, good practice guides for the tourism sector, and a specific financing line was launched to support accessibility projects in tourism under the Valorizar Supporting Program.